Welcome to Root Cause Medicine, presented by Spirit of Health, transforming lives through real health solutions. All right, well, welcome to the Root Cause Medicine podcast. I'm Dr. Vaughn with Spirit of Health. We have our special guest here, Dr. Jaban. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Jaban.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. I'm going to read Dr. Jaban's bio. It's just a couple paragraphs here, but just to start, Dr. Jaban and I have been friends for quite a few years now. He's actually here in Kansas City, so just blessed to have another amazing doctor here in Kansas City with us. We probably met through Cellcore, I'm guessing, a few years. Even though we're in the same town, I don't think we knew each other until kind of the Cellcore kind of connection kind of brought us together. But I've been to Dr. Jaban's place a few times. He's helped us with some different training seminars. I did some muscle testing training with Dr. Jaban. And we just have a lot of mutual friends in the community, in the healing community. So yeah, Dr. Jaban, he's a chiropractor, doctor of chiropractic. He's in Kansas City, works virtually with clients through functional medicine, helps assist them in overcoming chronic health conditions. At 25, Jaban, you went from being an award-winning college athlete to not being able to get out of bed. That's a pretty strong statement. Sought out countless doctors looking for answers, but doctors gave him the Band-Aid solution. Later diagnosed with Lyme disease, and once Dr. Jaban overcame this complex infection, he dedicated his practice to helping clients discover the causes of their symptoms. I always call you Dr. Jaban. It says here Dr. Moore, but Dr. Jaban, I'll just use that, specializes in Lyme disease, PANS and PANDAS, autism, parasitic infections, and environmental toxicities. Dr. Jaban and his team at the Redefining Wellness Centers sees clients virtually. His website's drjabanmoore.com, and you can gain access to education, live videos, and programs. So today, we're going to talk about chronic health conditions, the role toxins and infections play in making us sick. And I think it's great. I think personal stories are great. So since the topic is chronic health conditions and the role of toxins and infections, want to give us just a little bit on your story. You were, like you said, an athlete, and then all of a sudden you're chronically ill in bed, no answers, later get diagnosed with Lyme disease. Kind of how did that start?
Well, I mean, go to college, having a great time, training, lifting, performing. And I noticed in college that there was kind of just like a cap where didn't really feel like I was gaining much anymore. I wasn't getting stronger at the rate that I was used to. Honestly, I kind of wrote it off to just, okay, I just hit that peak. I graduated, went to chiropractic school. And when I was in chiropractic school, I lost 60 pounds and I physically looked the best that I'd ever looked, because when I was in college, I was a shot putter. So I was a big boy. So I had a six pack. Like I got pictures of myself looking what I thought looked like the picture of health. Like so many others, they look good or they look well on the outside. People don't think they feel bad. But that's when the floor fell out from under me. I ended up with erectile dysfunction as an early sign. When you're 23, 4, 5, that's not normal. Although if you go to your medical providers, they just say, oh, sometimes that just happens, because that's what I got told. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to accept that. I started having more pain in my joints, brain fog, fatigue. I just didn't feel like myself. And it just kept progressing and progressing. And I was fortunate. I was able to go to a lot of doctors and sit in conferences and have access to people to ask questions to that your average person didn't have at the time. And there wasn't as much podcasting and social media and Instagram answers out there like there are now, where you can at least get an idea of some of those things. Back then, it was just harder to get information. But I'm sitting at conferences with some of the best functional med docs, whether they're MDs, DOs, DCs, NDs. And I would just ask people like, hey, so if you had these symptoms with somebody, what would it be? And so often I got no answers, because I didn't get answers going Western. I didn't get answers going functional. I'd get given, you can take the little blue pill, that'll fix it. As far as the erectile dysfunction, you could take, L-arginine, that'll fix it. And none of it was a solution. It was all Band-Aids, and I hated that.
Yep.
And that didn't solve I was tearing ligaments in my elbow and my hip when I was lifting weights, and I wasn't even lifting heavy anymore. I was just lifting, like warming up, I would tear. So I knew I was breaking down. Finally, I'm sitting at a conference, and another Kansas City doc, a friend of mine, he's like, man, have you ever heard of Lyme disease? I'm like, yeah. He's like, have you looked into that? No. Tell me more. He goes, I don't really know anything else, but it just came to my mind when they were talking about rare infections. And I was like, oh, well, so I started going down that rabbit hole. I found an expert in that who happened to be in Wisconsin. I drove up, and he's like, yep, that's it. And started putting me on a protocol. Within a few weeks, I actually started to feel a difference, which is honestly uncommon. I've worked with a lot of Lyme clients, and do not put in your mind that a few weeks into a protocol, you should be feeling some better. But fortunately, I was starting to feel better. There's a hidden piece of my story that I didn't know about. Lyme actually kicked off the symptoms when I was living in a super moldy basement. I had been out of that super moldy basement now for years. So I think I had leftover lingering infections that my body wasn't able to beat, but I was out of the thing that probably broke my body down, which was the mold. So it allowed me to be able to potentially heal quicker. And then also just genetically, you look at epigenetics, my body was genetically in a strong position, even though I was beaten down by the mold, the Lyme, the stress of school, and everything else that really hit me. And one other little piece, when you lose 60 pounds in 3 months and you were toxic from, for me, mold, and had Lyme activated, it actually puts you in a really bad position. So I had this storm of problems hit me that took me down. And when I got into care with somebody that really knew what they were doing, that was using specific microcurrent therapy, herbs, vitamins, body work, I just started coming out of it pretty quickly, and I was super fortunate. And then since then, it's been my mission to educate and help people that were in the position that just don't get answers other places.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. I think it's interesting because I love chiropractors. You're a chiropractor. So many professionals in our industry are chiropractors. I refer people out to chiropractors, and your story is hard. It's challenging. It was a horrible thing that happened. In a way, you could really see it as a blessing, because if you think about most chiropractors, how do they set up their clinic? Right? We're gonna see people for 2 minutes, and we're gonna do an adjustment, and we're gonna assembly line people through. And again, I'm not saying that's not bad, or that's bad, or that they're not helping people. But I'm guessing you didn't set up your clinic with that type of a model based off of your experience. And like I said, in a way, it's kind of a blessing that like you were able to learn so much at such a young age because of your own illness, and take chiropractic to this whole like functional level beyond just like adjusting the spine.
Absolutely. When I went into practice, it was honestly my goal of even becoming a chiropractor was to help athletes, because I was an athlete, and I just started sitting down. I was like, I could be an orthopedic surgeon, I could be a physical therapist, I could be a chiropractor. And when I really thought about it, I was like, who do I go to when I have a problem? I went to chiropractors who specialized in sports injury, who would spend time with me, who would give me very unique rehabs that would help me get back on the field like quickly. That's who I went to. So that's why I went to chiropractic school. Well, then when I got there and I had my own personal issue, well, it was muscle testers, it was functional medicine doctors that were able to give me the most answers. So when I got into practice, I took all that information, and that's what I became. Was I want to be the guy that is the last provider you have to see for the problem you're dealing with, because you're going to get an answer. I'm going to do the research. I'm going to figure it out. Now, Dr. Lindsley, who I went to for Lyme, he played a role in that too, because at the time, virtual practice wasn't a thing. And he was so busy that he didn't need more people traveling to see him. I mean, it was 6, 8, 10 weeks out to get into him. So he was like, okay, there's these Lyme people in Missouri. I'm going to send them to you. So anybody that was below Missouri or in Missouri were sent down to me from him that were getting referred. So I had these Lyme patients walking in like day one. So I'm like, one, I have all this time in the world because my practice was not full day one. That's just not how it works. So you come in, I'm just thinking about you all day and figuring out like your situation, looking into your labs, learning your biomarkers. And it was an incredible opportunity to have these Lyme people at the very beginning. I look back, I actually kept a list for a long time of the people that I wasn't able to give an answer to. And I would call them back later and be like, hey, I learned this new thing and I think it fits your situation.
Yeah,
But it allowed for me to learn and also have the time to learn and spend the time with people. And I still have a lot longer appointments. I still do a lot more research, a lot more labs. I don't have quite as much time for each individual person as I did then, but I don't actually need as much because there's so much more experience after 11 years of practice now.
totally. Totally. Yeah. So today, we wanted to talk about toxins and infections and how they make us sick. Obviously, your story involves Lyme and mold. You mentioned you've been in practice now for 11 years. I know you've helped and worked with thousands of people, tons of children. Maybe a general question, maybe easy to answer, maybe tough to answer. But my question would be, what toxins are you seeing affect the most people?
I mean, there's so many toxins out there that get talked about now. There's whole Instagram pages, YouTube pages on just toxins. And every day it's avoid chocolate because it's got lead or cadmium. Avoid,
Right.
this or that. The list could be so long. My number one toxin is definitely mold because mold is such a wrecking ball. And the way we build homes today is making basically a mold box. It's sheetrock with low flow of air because we want it to be energy efficient, which increases the likelihood of if there's water damage is not going to get dried up on natural means. Humidity goes sky high. I actually had my house spray foamed, which energy efficiency wise is incredible. But the humidity in my home is a absolute problem in the summer. So then I had to bring in dehumidifiers. I didn't know this before I did that. I should have done more research. I'm not sure that I'm upset that I did it. It's just like, okay, with any positive, there is the side effects. So mold can be just devastating to people's healths. And it's so unknown because for most people, they've been living in a house for a long time. And then there was this leak in the roof that led to some sheetrock that got mold that then led to spore producing mycotoxin producing mold that didn't hit them like a ton of bricks. It was a slow onset. So they developed a little bit more breathing trouble, a little asthma. Their kids started having more frequent urination. They started feeling a little more fatigued and brain fog. Their colon may have even backed up a little bit because of the effect that mycotoxins have on the liver and bile production. And it's not something where it was water got in and all of a sudden I'm sick. It's a progression over months and years. And
Right.
with so many people, it's not something they're looking for because they're like, oh, well, mold's everywhere. And I tested my house for mold when I moved in. It was okay. Well, testing for homes with mold typically is never done correctly from a real estate purchase perspective unless you know what you're looking for. So mold is definitely for me the number one thing that I'm looking at. And instead of going after a second one that people are aware of, I'm going to say one that is less common, which is radioactive elements in the water. So uranium, radium, radon, all of these things can affect your water supply. So if you're drinking tap water and you haven't looked at what's in your water supply, it's time. It is something that I see so often that is completely overlooked, that no one talks about. And it has similar effects to that of mold. I mean, let's just stop for a moment and think. If you think about radiation and what that does to someone's health, everybody thinks, well, this could come from cancer. It can kill cancer cells. Radiation can mutate things from like a nuclear bomb because we see that in movies. Well, what if you're drinking it every day at a low amount? What's that going to do to you over a long period of time? Oh, well, it's going to suppress your immune system. It's going to destroy your normal mitochondrial function because mitochondrial function is based off of polarities. It's based off of electrical movement. So that's why you make energy through something called the electron transport chain. And when the polarity is changed, you don't make that energy well. So I see it in the biomarkers. I see it affecting through lab testing your Krebs cycle, your ability to make energy. And when your ability to make energy goes down, you don't recover well. You can't mount an immune reaction. You don't think well. So this is something that when I show this to people, they're like, I've been to, and they name off all these amazing doctors that did not see it, did not look for that specific problem. And I'm like, yeah, well, let's deal with this. And then we have just a huge shift in health because we finally got to that root cause that people were missing. So most common, mold, and still fairly common, but not as common, but definitely overlooked, radioactive elements.
Good. So water would be important, and I've heard that you can't necessarily get radioactive elements out through basic filtration. What do you recommend as far as how do people deal with this radiation problem?
There's only one way that I have found to remove radioactive elements from water, and it's called distillation. So as you're listening, if you're thinking, well, I have a filter in my home, is it distilled? The answer is no. If you don't know that it's a distiller, it is not a distiller. Distilling is an annoying process. I do it every day. Now you can have nicer systems or you can have a tabletop where you have to exchange the bottle out each day, but you only produce about a gallon every hour. And it is a process of evaporation from one tank into another that you filter through. But it is the only way that I've seen. I've seen reverse osmosis. I've seen filters that increase and decrease acidity. I've seen filters that structure water. And I'm not saying those other processes aren't valuable. I think structuring water and the pH of water is important, but you got to start with clean. Because I think it was a Yahoo article I saw, 170 million Americans are drinking radioactive water.
Oof. Wow. I believe it. I've heard of what's it called? The radium belt, like Wisconsin, Illinois. I see it a lot in California because, I do the testing too. I feel like New York, New Jersey, California, certain areas of Wisconsin, Illinois. So there's certain areas that are worse than others, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And this is something where usually my testing is using a hair test to see if the particulates show up in the hair, because you're not getting dosed with massive amounts of radium or uranium out of the water supply. Typically, It's small. So it's built up over time. So I'm seeing it more in hair testing than anywhere else. I do see it in urine testing at times, and that's more confirmatory. It's mostly in the moderate section when I'm seeing it in the moderate sections there. So it's interesting. It's so interesting to me because people will move away from California or the radium belt. They'll move to an area where the water is safe. I'm still seeing radium coming out of them or uranium coming out of them. And they're like, well, where's this coming from? So we have to dig into that history a little bit. And it's not coming out when you're not getting it in unless your body's able to clear it. So with any toxin, there's always that interesting piece of, well, doc, I'm not seeing this in my testing. Okay. Well, we've got all these other things we can work on, but let's check and see if your body can even detox. So I'll check through lab testing, hydrosodium potassium level in your hair. Like, are you able to mobilize toxins out of your cell to where you can even see it in your urine or your hair? If you're not currently getting it every single day, but it was from the past, if you've been sick for a while. So testing and the importance of testing and understanding what you're testing and then understanding the physiological function of your personal body is so key to getting the appropriate information when it comes to things like toxins, like mold and uranium.
Right. Yeah, because chronic illness is complex, and there's a rabbit hole of information on the internet, who I jokingly refer to as Dr. Google, all kinds of Instagram, and it's the information age, right? It's so complex. Maybe you can speak on maybe some of the mechanisms of action related to chronic illness, because it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did I get parasites and then now I have mold, and was the parasites really the root problem? Or it's because I had radiation and that's why I have all these infections I can't get rid of because it's really the radiation. Like, how do you navigate these complex cases? Because I know you've seen thousands of complex cases of chronic illness.
I have. I've seen a lot. I've seen people come in where you look at their labs and I'm like, well, you're the winner today. We've got all the things. We've got mold, radioactive elements, Lyme, parasites, GI bacterial overgrowth, viruses. Like, so the list is
Yep.
a mile long. They check all the boxes, which I just tell them like, hey, look, you feel terrible. The more boxes that we check here, the better, because that means that we have things to work on that can be alleviated that then can make you feel
Right.
better. So it's a win to
Yeah.
get a long list when you feel really bad. Now, if you feel really good and things are starting to accumulate, that's a different story. But that's not usually who walks into my office, the people that feel really good. Every once in a while I get a biohacker, and it's kind of fun to just, work with somebody that is just there for optimal wellness. But the mission is
Right.
to help those people that were in my shoes back when I was sick. So, you know, the mechanism is interesting. And I actually had a storm come through my property here recently, and a tree limb fell. And as I was working on this tree limb, I started thinking about my practice, and I was like, this is kind of the way it works, right? The tree itself, and when I say tree limb, by the way, I mean like one that could have landed on my truck and my truck would be no more. Like massive, 2 foot thick part of a tree.
Right.
So I couldn't just lift it and move it around. So as I go out to this tree limb, I'm like, how do I get this done? Like, I'm going to have to chainsaw bits and pieces of this to get it knocked out. But what made the tree weak is always that question, right? Like, what was the root cause? Well, so often it's not one. Your body has the ability to adapt to a lot of things. So maybe you moved into mold, and if your body had the ability to withstand 100-mile-an-hour wind in the case of this tree limb, if your body had the ability to withstand 100 points of stress, and you moved into mold and that took away 30 points of stress, and just your daily activity takes away another 30 points of stress. Now you have 40 points left before you break, before you overwhelm your system. Let's say you had a little bit of childhood trauma or work overload, and that's another 20 points. And then you have another 10 points of you got bit by a tick. And then your last 10 points could be you got the flu. And all of a sudden now your body is overtaxed. It can't keep up. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's whatever you want to say, your bucket overfilled. And in the case of this tree limb, it broke and it fell. But all I know as the person walking out to this tree limb is it's on the ground and I got to start cleaning it up.
Right.
So it's no longer about what is the singular root cause. It's everything that accumulated to drop this to the ground. And I have to pick it up piece by piece by piece. And there is a proper order to it. So in the case of this tree limb, I went to the limb that was sticking straight up off of it that I could get to the most easy. And I started to chainsaw that off. So, and my clients, I go, okay, well, these are your deficiencies. I'm going to bring in sodium and potassium because you were deficient in that, which happens when your body actually breaks down and it starts using up its electrolytes too quickly because it's in a state of fight or flight. So it depletes important minerals. So I bring back those important minerals in. So that's the first limb. And then after we do that, we make sure that we support if there's been any mental issues such as trauma. We get you into therapy. We get you doing physical therapy for your brain is what I call it, whether that be somatic, limbic, or vagal nerve retraining. If you have faith, we get you back to a therapist that can work with you on your faith, that can get you to retrain your nervous system out of the fight or flight that it's likely in because you've been in stress for so long. That stress could be mold and infections and so on, or it could be what happened to you in other parts of your life. After we evaluate deficiencies and pieces that can bring your body back online, we evaluate your stress response. We then evaluate, are you living in a safe place? So with this limb, I had to move it off of my driveway. So I got a bobcat and I moved it off the driveway so that we could still continue functioning. Because, if it stops me from going and getting food and living a life and being safe, then it's going to create a problem. So we look at your diet, your hygiene, your place that you live in. Is that safe from mold or water? So that we understand that you live in a safe place. We're doing the work to make you feel safe within the mental health aspect. And then Now that I have this giant 2-foot trunk of a tree limb on the ground, I go, okay, I'm going to start chopping it up, start at one end. And that one end is built by going through all the labs. And if you were a person that came into me and you had literally everything imaginable, every single thing, I'd start by detox and drainage, making sure that you poop, making sure your lymph and your colon move. I would from there go into parasites to make sure that there's nothing blocking those pathways, because parasites can actually block them up. Some people say you have to start with mold. I'm like, well, you can't live in mold. But I'm not going to start by detoxing mold. If you have parasites blocking your pathways that won't allow the mold to move out and then recirculate. So I go parasite, bacteria, gut, then systemic, mycoplasma, colonizing molds, radioactive elements, metals, environmental toxins, fungus, virus. And you may have to hit any one of those things again as you're going through the process, because it took too long for you to, parasites were 9 protocols ago. You may have to dabble into parasites as you're going through that process. And again, that's for the person that has everything, which most people don't have everything, but I just wanted to put that out there for the people so that as you're listening and you're like, well, I got this, 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 and this, you can put the check boxes in there and you can go, okay, all right, this is how I build it. And then when you get to the bottom of this, somewhere within that journey, we're adding more rebuild. So if you had leaky gut, poor gut health, low microbiome, we're going to start adding those things back in, typically not in the first few protocols, but as we keep going, somewhere along the lines, we have to start rebuilding gut microbiome while we're cleaning out the things that were pathogenic there.
Yeah. Wow, that's good. So it sounds to me like you're saying that people probably aren't going to get well in a month, or they're not going to get well because they did a 10-day colon cleanse, or even they might not get well because they're hardcore, man. 21-day juice fast, man. I'm going to knock this thing out. Right? Like
Yeah.
I think it's good to speak on, and I don't think it's our fault and our patient's fault. And I say that because I think it's a cultural problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the way the medical system has trained us to think and to believe. And so what's the reality of what it takes to get a chronically ill person well?
I've heard a lot of good analogies or sayings around this. I've heard for every year, it's a month, which is interesting. So if it's been 5 or 10 years, it's a minimum of 5 or 10 months, but that's too short in many cases. If you're chronically ill, if you have SIRS or mast cell, it could be years. If you're not those things, but you're still sick, you still have symptoms of 8, 9, 10, it's at least going to be that many months, 8, 9, 10. If you go through work with me, or if you listen to that map that I just gave you, which I call my roadmap, and you're like, yep, I hit on this, it's typically 2 to 3 protocols for each thing that you answer yes to. So if you say yes to bacteria, 2 to 3 months. Yes to parasite, 2 to 3 more months. Yes to mold, 2 to 3 more months. And that's when I say protocol, and I'm equating that to months, that's if you can take a protocol, not have a major herx that slows us down. So protocol is 4 to 6 weeks without slowing down. It's longer if you're sensitive. And that's just the reality. And it's so hard for people to hear this. And I know that. I mean, I spent years searching for an answer before I even ever started a protocol. And I've worked with people where sunlight, water, all food, any herb is a problem. And we spend 6 months at the start simply just doing somatic work, limbic work, breathing, calming the nervous system, getting you into a safe environment. And we haven't even started protocols yet. But now you can start a protocol, which is just as valuable. But it's so hard when you've been sick, when you're stuck in that spot. It's so hard to step back, take a deep breath and go, okay, I see where I'm at. It makes sense. It's going to take a while. And then accept that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. I think I think hope's really important. I've always said that I feel like even if somebody doesn't work with me or our office, that if I can instill hope in them and actually
Mhm.
get them to believe that there's answers and they can get better, at least I've accomplished something. So I think it'd be neat, just all your experience, all the people you've seen, and if a couple stories pop into your mind, great. But like, what kind of hope can we offer people? Because from what I'm seeing, I don't think the world's getting better. As far as food supply and toxins in our environment and current systems that we have in place to help people get better, at least from the medical standpoint. So, like, we need to give people some hope. Can you help with that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I agree. The world itself is not giving us more and better tools and opportunities as far as a majority to be healthy. However, there is the subset of people like yourself that are putting information out there, that are educating, that are learning, and there's a group of individuals that are caring about their health more than probably ever. And there's so much information and research that you can live truly well and vibrantly and feel great and amazing. And I mean, I had Lyme, and now, I mean, I'm 37 years old. I've been doing different things from CrossFit to hiking mountains to traveling to going ATVing to, I mean, I feel great. And I didn't in the past when I was young, when I was 25. I feel way better than back then. I feel so much less pain and brain fog, and I optimize and I operate at such a higher level. So that's me. And whether you're 77 and you've been depressed and with stomach pains and migraines your entire life, there's hope. I've seen people at that age commit to changing their environment, get their amalgams out of their mouth, which is mercury, stop eating gluten and dairy, and all of a sudden go, wow, I feel better than when I was 40. Or I've seen the 35-year-old overworked moms come in where they've been anxious and stressed since the mean girls in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And after going through our protocols and getting the environment around them safe, which means maybe dumping some of the mean girl friends or changing the way and the perspective that they see the world from sometimes a overachiever slash people pleaser mentality to taking care of themselves, making them feel a little bit more number one, and then detoxing out some of the mold from the dorms in college and um, reclaiming their gut. Because if you're stressed out for years, your microbiome changes. And then it creates brainwave patterns to get stuck in that. So as we go through um, cleaning up your gut and changing the mindset toward what is important in life, I have seen people go, wow, I feel free. I'm enjoying my children, my husband more than I have enjoyed in years. I've had people walk into my clinic and go, I don't know if I'm making changes, doc. And I go, okay, well, what's going on? She's like, well, I find my husband funny again for the first time in 20 years. And I'm like, well, that's a big change. And that was just like the beginning phase of like, okay, there's some things happening. So there's so much hope. You really do have the opportunity to take control of your life, but no one's going to do it for you. And the world sure as heck isn't going to lead you there on their own. So you just have to go, okay, this is my commitment and I'm going to get well and I'm going to feel well. And it's so funny because kids that come from families where this is the priority, you can tell the difference. They're happier. Like my kid, people are just like, he's so calm. He's so good. He's so happy. He's so relaxed. And I mean, he's one. So you never know. It could just be a personality thing. But I talk to other people in this profession and their kids get all of the same comments because they're not getting red food dyes and gluten and dairy, and they're not getting sugar highs. And not to blame parents that are giving those things, but they're neurotoxic and they create different behavior, and it's studied and well documented. And it affects our children So much so that studies done on mothers who have the highest plastic level in their body when giving birth have a 7-point lower IQ than parents with the lowest plastic level giving birth. So it's well documented at this point that the toxins affect who we are and how we behave and what goes on. And when we remove them, we feel so much better and perform so much higher.
Yeah. Amen. Well, thank you. Thank you for what you do, all the thousands of people you've helped and you continue to help. And I just very thankful to know you as a friend and a colleague. And I think it's awesome that we're in the same, city. And so, I think this is a good place to end. Definitely check our next podcast. Dr. Jaban and I are going to do another one, and we're really going to hone in on lab testing and different biomarkers and how to actually hone in on knowing what exactly your toxicity issues are. Because unfortunately, in our world today, the medical establishment, either they don't know how to test for the right things, or maybe they do and they don't look for the right things, like root cause, what we're all about. And so I think it's important to talk more on that. So I want to touch on that on our next one. So thank you, Dr. Jaban.
Thanks for having me.